Greetings and välkommen. I'm Catherine of Sky, and I hope to make your day refreshingly Swedish. So today we're going to be talking about differences in culture between Sweden and the United States. I have lived in the United States for a very long time, but recently moved to Sweden. And having lived here for about 8 months so far, I definitely have a good idea of what's going on here and can tell you about some of the things you might actually find shocking. So first of all, let's talk about self-worth. In the United States, your self-worth is almost always linked to your job. And also the way you view other people is linked to their job. As in a person who does like a blue collar job or manual labor, maybe a janitor at a school or at a business, or a bus driver, or people who work in mining, or any kind of a job that's considered not university education, people are looked down on in the United States. That's just how it is. You are less of a person if you don't have that university degree with a high-powered job. That's just how it is. In Sweden, it's completely the opposite. Their worth is not linked to your job. A person's self-worth is everybody is worth something. Everybody's unique. Everybody is a person. And this is very, very obvious when you interact with people in the world. I remember, being in the United States and even in the UK, where my mom was disabled. She was in a wheelchair, and people were talking to me like she wasn't even there. Oh, does she want this? Does she want that? I'm like, she's not stupid. Just ask her yourself, like, what's going on with you? We don't have that kind of discrimination against people who are disabled, people who have different jobs, people who look different. The Swedish population is very, very diverse. We're a very multicultural society. People from many, many different countries, people of many, many different skin colors, and everybody just works together, and there's no discrimination in general here in terms of self-worth and stuff like that. So no matter what job you have, you are thought of as a person rather than, oh yeah, they're a high-powered doctor, they're more worth knowing, something like that. All right. The next thing is the government actually cares about their citizens. In the United States, there's a big war between caring for corporations or caring for individuals, and that's the way it is. Mostly you see from the outside, and it may not be obvious when you're inside the United States, but from the outside, you just see, okay, well, these politicians, they all have their fingers in the honey pot. They're going to make laws that make it better for them to get richer. And the United States is completely and totally and utterly corrupt, completely corrupt. Despite their best efforts to try to convince the American public with brainwashing that, oh yes, it's the freest country in the world. It's the only country with freedom, and we are not corrupt and nothing, all of that. It's complete BS. Anyway, in Sweden, we make laws to help people, to protect people from unscrupulous businesses. Maybe businesses want to work their employees to death. That's not okay. We have unions here as well that protect citizens' rights and make sure that companies don't go too far, because it's really, really important. Some of the social laws are within law, and some of them are within the unions in terms of making sure that businesses do not overreach themselves with making people work too many hours or not paying them enough, stuff like that. Speaking of income, everyone here earns a decent income, and people do not work 2 and 3 jobs like they do in the United States. Every business needs to pay their employees a fair wage. That means people who work at fast food restaurants or delivery drivers, any kind of job. It doesn't matter what job you have. You do not need a second job to live, period. That's just the way Swedish society is, because again, it's linked to that whole a person's worth is not their job. Every person deserves to have time off. Every person deserves to rest. So that's why every person is paid a fair wage, and that means that fast food is expensive. However, it's not more expensive than in the United States, which is a bit of a shock to most people, I think. It is expensive, and we don't usually go out very often for fast food. Like in America, people may go out every day for fast food. Here, it's about once a week or once every couple of weeks you might order out. But in the United States, the difference is that fast food is very expensive. It costs about the same, but they don't give the profits to the employees. They give their employees minimum wage, which can be $5 an hour, which is nothing. That is definitely not a livable wage. And the difference is that in Sweden, people actually get paid fairly, and they don't have to overstress and just grind themselves into the ground by working multiple jobs. And continuing on with money, most people don't use cash. In fact, the Swedish government is thinking about outlawing cash, getting rid of it entirely, because we have such a strong electronic banking system here. We have an app called Bank ID, which is linked with our national social security number. And it's a very difficult thing to get. It takes a lot of application to get there, and a Swedish bank account, which is also difficult to get, as I can attest to. It's very, very secure. There's nothing like it in the US that I have seen, and it basically allows you to identify yourself to any governmental agency with very little effort. It's just a login in the app. So you can even pay with Bank ID at the grocery store if you want to. It's a very nice system because your ID is kind of used everywhere, but it's secure. It's not like the United States. You get a social security card, a number printed on a piece of cardstock, which is like, there's no security in that. There's no security in that. People get their identities stolen all the time in the United States. But here, it's much more difficult to steal someone's identity because you do need that Bank ID password or fingerprint protection. Taxes in Sweden are super easy to file. I mean, unless you're like me and have your own business. But even then, it should be pretty easy. I know my partner, Matthias, he can log into Skatteverket, which is basically the tax agency, and he can do his taxes in less than a minute. I think it took him last time. The government does your taxes for you. They know how much you're getting, how much you're earning. They put it on a sheet. You just have to approve. Okay, this is how much I earned, how much tax there was, and that's it. Not like in the United States where, I don't know, it takes me several days of full-time hours to sort out my taxes. But even other people, they end up either they buy a program called like TurboTax or some of the other options for that. And it takes a few hours to actually go through your taxes and put in all the information, which I don't really understand why a lot of it has to be filled out and sent to the government, because the government technically already has it anyway, because the employer has to report your income to the government. So why don't they have it anyway? I find it one of those bureaucratic, silly things. It's like, it doesn't make sense. I assume it's probably because it's based on these very, very complicated tax codes, and it's so entrenched and so old and so lumbering and horrible that nobody wants to fix it properly. So they make everybody fill in these tax forms either with a program or on paper. Some people still use paper. Oh my God. We are paperless here. Mostly, I don't even have, I was writing an address label the other day, and I don't even have a scrap of paper to write on to make an address label. So I had to like scavenge one of my, a package that came to me, and I just cut a piece of paper from the packaging, which is great because it's reuse of materials. So, but yeah, we don't use paper here. It's crazy the way Americans use taxes. And of course there's tax fraud because people want to cheat their taxes. Companies want to cheat their taxes. And it's all based on a lot of self-reporting. I think there is some kind of margin for like auditing, but I think that that's rarely enforced. So no wonder the U.S. government doesn't have as much money as they need for the budget. I mean, the federal debt is just spiraling out of control. It's because partly they don't get enough taxes because a lot of people are cheating. So if they had a national tax situation like we do here in Sweden, I think they'd get a lot more tax money in and cut down on some of the fraud going in. Also, one interesting thing is when I was talking to the Skatteverket people the other day, the tax agency people, about setting up my business, they don't call taxes taxes. They call it civil contribution, which I think is amazing. That's great. That's exactly what it is. It's a civil contribution. It pays for roads, schools, healthcare, all that good stuff that we need. And that's what it is. It's a civil contribution. So I like that terminology. And I think if Americans adopted that, they would understand better what it's for, rather than just, we're being taxed too much. But here, people are happy paying taxes. In general, they're happy. Like in America, people, oh God, it's tax time again. Oh, I'm so angry, all this. But in Sweden, people are okay paying taxes because they know what it's for. It's for, buildings and roads and canals and all the things that make society work. Police, fire, schools, all that stuff. Anyway, another thing that's interesting that might be shocking to Americans is that only 81% of Swedish households own a car, compared to 91% of American households. And typically in American households, you may have a car for every person. Like a four-person family with 2 teenagers is probably going to have 4 cars. But in Sweden, you almost always have 1 car for the family. Another thing that's a little bit different is in Swedish cities. I live in a city, I think it's about 100,000 people or so. And so it's very comparable to different places I've lived in the United States. But everywhere in the city, you have to pay for parking. Now, I know that's the case in really big cities in the United States, but in a city my size, I wouldn't have expected that. Another thing is that you pay for your own parking space for your own car. So if you live in an apartment building, you buy a parking space that's kind of in the apartments. They have like a lot or a parking garage sometimes in their building, and they may have a parking spot reserved for you. Maybe not. It depends. Those parking spaces are they're in high demand. So you may be on a waiting list to get a parking space. It may take a year or 2 to get a parking space. But my parking space was so expensive from my housing association that I just decided, nope, that's going to be way too much. I'm not going to pay that. So I'm just not going to have a car. But you can do that here in Sweden because there's a lot of public transport, and it's public transport that works. Some people in America really look down on public transport, and that's another social divider in America, that only poor people use public transport. Only people who can afford to waste their time use public transport. However, in Sweden, everybody uses public transport. Again, it's not an indicator of wealth, education, or social status. It is a convenience. So for 40 crowns, or about $4 US, you can use almost any kind of transportation for that price for about, I think it's about 75 to 90 minutes. I forget exactly how long it is. It's a little over an hour. And you can use buses, trams, trains, not water taxis, but the boats that work for the city. There's some routes that you need in Stockholm especially, and use any of those for $4 and just go anywhere. You can go to the end of the line, which is about 2 hours away. So the time counts from the point where you enter the station. So you can literally go to Uppsala from Gnesta, which is on the pink line. There are 2 totally opposite ends of the Stockholm pendeltåg, the commuter train line. And I think it takes around 2 hours to get from one to the other, something like that. So you can change trains as much as you want. You can get off anywhere you want. It's not based on distance. It's based on time. So it's very, very cheap. It's very convenient. The trains run every 15 minutes. Most buses also run every 10 or 15 minutes. And it's even more often sometimes in the heart of Stockholm. So it's very, very convenient. It's very on time. People from every social class and wealth level use public transport because it is there for the people. It's very, very convenient. Another very strange thing is happy birthday. Now, you wouldn't think that would be odd, but the Swedish happy birthday song is a bit gruesome. In America, it's just, oh yeah, happy birthday to you, have a great time, all this kind of thing. But the Swedish birthday song has quite a few verses. Now, some of them are abbreviated depending on how dark your friends are. But basically, it starts off by wishing you live 100 years. And then once you have lived 100 years, you're going to be shot and then pushed in a wheelbarrow. And then you're going to be hanged on a horse backwards. And then you'll be drowned in a bottle of champagne. And when you have drowned, then you'll be celebrated with a very long song. I think it's kind of crazy. To be honest, it's a bit nuts, but that's the way the birthday song goes. So anyway, yeah, that's that.